The mess hall of Arcturus Academy smelled like recycled air and synthetic protein paste, the same as every other interstellar military institution scattered across the Confederacy's 12 systems. But today, something else was in the air. Tension. 3 cadets sat at the far table, watching the human girl eat. She wasn't doing anything special. Cadet Mara Ellison was simply having lunch, tearing apart a piece of dense ration bread with her bare hands, chewing slowly, staring at nothing. Her uniform was standard gray, her short dark hair slightly damp from the morning's training session. A fading bruise wrapped around her left forearm like a bracelet. She didn't seem to notice the stares. She never did. "I don't believe it," muttered Joe, the Velthary cadet, tall, blue-scaled, with 4 arms folded across his broad chest. She survived the Kessler endurance circuit. Full intensity. The instructors ran it at settings they use for Draken soldiers. "Draken soldiers have redundant organ clusters," said me, the second cadet, a compact Sarati female whose bioluminescent markings had gone dim, a sign of discomfort. "Humans have 1 heart." "1 heart," Joe repeated. "1 set of lungs. No armored exodermis. No thermal regulation glands." He shook his head. "And she finished in 3rd place." The 3rd cadet, New York, said nothing. He was Growthian, older than the other 2, quieter, with deep-set eyes that had seen more than a few combat rotations. He was watching Mara with an expression that wasn't contempt. It was something more careful than that. Curiosity, maybe. Or wariness. "She cheated," Joe said finally. "Has to be. The humans have implants now, some kind of." "She doesn't," New York said quietly. Joe turned. "What?" "I checked her file." New York's voice was flat. "No implants. No neural augments. No chemical regulation supplements beyond standard issue. She is baseline human." A pause. "From Caravan 4. The table went silent. Caravan 4. The name landed like a dropped weapon. Caravan 4, a planet in the Outer Drift, classified as a Class 7 Deathworld by the Confederacy's Environmental Hazard Registry. Tectonic instability. Atmospheric toxicity fluctuations. A native megafauna catalog that read like a list of nightmares. The kind of world where human settlements had no business existing, and yet somehow did, because humans were exactly the kind of creatures who looked at a planet trying to kill them and decided to build a homestead on it anyway. Children raised on Caravan 4 didn't have implants. They didn't need them. Joe recovered first. He was young, ambitious, and, critically, unwise enough to let his ego outrun his instincts. "I still say she's overrated," he said, louder than necessary. "Endurance test scores mean nothing. It's not the same as real combat capability." He pushed back from the table and stood up. "I've been training in 0G contact drills since I was 6 cycles old. 4 arms versus 2? I'd like to see that number." Me looked at him. "Joe. I'm not going to hurt her," he said, with the confident smile of someone who has never been genuinely afraid. "Just a friendly demonstration. Show the class what actual physical superiority looks like." New York said nothing. He just watched. Joe crossed the mess hall. A few other cadets looked up, reading the situation immediately. Someone quietly set down their fork. "Ellison." Mara looked up from her bread. Her eyes were a very ordinary brown, and they found him with no particular hurry. "Sparring match," Joe said. "After lunch. Training ring C. You and me." He tilted his head, gesturing at his 4 arms with a casual spread. "Unless you'd rather not." Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay." Just that. "Okay." No hesitation. No assessment of his size, and Joe was large, a full head taller than her with a reach that could span a shuttle hatch. No glance around to see if people were watching. No checking if this was a good idea. Just okay, like he'd asked her to pass the salt. Joe smiled and walked back to his table. New York was staring at his food now. She didn't even blink, Me said quietly. No, New York agreed. That's not confidence, Me said. That's something else. New York nodded slowly. He'd seen it before, once, in a veteran who'd done 4 tours in the Rift Wars. The look of someone who had been afraid so many times, in situations so genuinely and completely lethal, that a large cadet asking for a spar simply did not register as a threat. Mara Ellison had grown up on a planet that wanted her dead. Joe was not that planet. Training Ring C held about 30 observers by the time they arrived. Word traveled fast at Arcturus Academy. Commander Cale Veyron stood at the edge of the ring with his arms behind his back, expression unreadable. He hadn't been told about this bout. He'd simply shown up, the way experienced commanders always seemed to materialize whenever something significant was about to happen. Joe warmed up ostentatiously, rolling all 4 shoulders, bouncing on his heels, demonstrating his range of motion to the watching cadets. He was performing. He knew it and enjoyed it. Mara stretched her neck once, to the left. That was all. The match start signal chirped. Joe moved fast, genuinely fast, faster than many expected for his size. He closed the distance in 2 strides and reached out with his lower left arm to grab. Mara wasn't there. She dropped, not fallen, dropped, a deliberate collapse into a crouch that went below his center of gravity like she'd done it 10,000 times, and came up on his inside with her shoulder driving into the joint between his second and third arm with surgical precision. The sound it made was not pleasant. Joe's momentum, substantial and committed, now had nowhere to go except down, and Mara guided it there with both hands, redirecting mass the way you redirect a river, not by stopping it, but by giving it a better direction. Joe hit the mat with an impact that rattled the ring's support frame. He was up in 2 seconds, to his credit. Velthari were resilient. But his second arm was moving wrong, and there was a new uncertainty in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He came at her twice more. The second attempt ended with him face down, her knee in the center of his back, her hand controlling his primary arm at an angle that suggested she could move it considerably further if she chose to. She didn't choose to. She released him. The third attempt he didn't finish, he stopped mid-lunge, looked at her standing there, calm and waiting, and something in his pride finally bent under the weight of information. He stepped back. He raised one hand. He conceded. The ring was very quiet. Me and New York were waiting at the edge. Me's bioluminescent markings had gone an uncomfortable shade of pale green. New York just looked at Mara as she stepped out. How, Me said, not quite a question. Mara picked up her water canteen. Saber elk, she said. Me blinked. I'm sorry? On my planet. Mara took a drink. Saber elk. About 3 times Joe's mass. Moves faster. Has 8 limbs. She paused. And it's motivated. She glanced back at where Joe was being helped to his feet by 2 other cadets. He wasn't motivated. She walked away. Commander Cale Veyron watched her go. He'd watched the entire match, and he'd watched it the way he watched things that required careful cataloging. He'd served for 23 years. He'd commanded units across 6 species. He'd seen exceptional soldiers. What he'd just watched was not technique, exactly. Technique was trained. This was something that had been burned into deep in the body's memory, at a level below conscious thought, the way only genuine survival experience created. She hadn't been thinking during that match. She'd just been doing what kept her alive. He made a note in his file on Cadet Ellison, brief, precise, the kind of note that followed a soldier upward through a career. Watch this one. That evening, Joe's arm was in a regenerative brace. Me sat beside him in the medical bay, quiet and thoughtful. New York had gone back to his quarters and pulled up everything he could find about Caravan 4. He read for 2 hours. When he finished, he sat back and stared at the ceiling. She grew up there, he thought. She grew up there and she came here, and she is bored. Somewhere across the academy, in her small standard-issue bunk, Mara Ellison lay staring at the ceiling too. Thinking about home. Thinking about how quiet it was here. How safe. And feeling, very faintly, restless.